So I just did this tier list rating of Toopy Binoo episodes, and I will tell you, you're definitely going to be in for a ride on how I put together this ranking. What's up everybody, this is Willie and welcome to a special kind of video where I'm going to be making a tier list that covers all episodes of Toopy Binoo and rating my personal enjoyment from every episode. This is going to be interesting, so I want to preface this by criteria of how I would rate my enjoyment from every episode. It's mostly based on the quality of it, the storyline, how satisfying it is, and how much does it stick out to me when I think about this show, and also how creative the show went with these episodes. Like, these are all an essence of how I'm going to assess these episodes when I'm rating them. And I am going to be using this online template I found online, which I'll link in the description as well if you want to interact with it yourself as well. And you see we have a tier list where there's Toopy-tastic, which is clearly the top, which I would describe the best. Then we have S, which I would say is more so the greats of the world, but definitely just falls short of being the absolute best. We have A, which will be the tier where the more average episodes would place. Then we have B, which is where I would describe the more middling episodes go. And then I guess C is where I would have to put the bottom tier episodes because there's no other choice, which I don't think really see makes sense. Like, why didn't they just put F? But you know, who cares? So now with that, we'll see how I rate these episodes. Alright, starting off with Super Ball. It's an episode that builds up a lot of intrigue, combining some elements of pursuit and activity that made things a lot of fun with my watch through of this episode. It's a good episode, a lot of interesting things happening in it, so I'll start this tier list by putting this in the S tier. Dreamland, definitely an episode that was one that I have a lot of memories of, so that already propels it enough on this list. And I did mention back in the video, I did find it thrilling, and I continue standing by it. It was unique to see Toopy immerse himself into Binoo's dream. We're taking into the context of the episode, Binoo was literally dreaming about himself dancing around a giant Toopy. So that was a cool touch to it. So where I would put this, I definitely would put it on the S tier as well, because it is that level of good. I'll definitely put it above Super Bowl because I at least have more nostalgia for it. Land of Lost, one that I do have great vivid memories of. It's a fun thrill of an exploration adventure with Toopy and Binoo finding lost stuff inside their couch, which is what reality is like these days. So the episode does a good job really embracing that in a fun way in this episode. So it's also another S tier. I'd probably put it below Dreamland just because it does slow down a bit. Little Bo Toopy. Yeah, I do put this episode in high regard because it is a funny episode, even though the adventure in Puzzle Land just comes off as pointless and you really understand the context of the episode, but I still feel like it was fun to see these one-off characters really just express their amusement when they find the truth of the whereabouts of the missing puzzle piece, which was right on Toopy's rear. So yes, another S tier episode, but probably below the other ones that I just put there. Trios, yes, our streak of S tier episodes is over. This one is still good, not gonna lie, but definitely not to the level that I actually would prefer over the other episodes that I just listed, so I am putting it in the A tier, because I do like the subplot with the squirrel and the cookies, but there was also some frustrations with it because Binoo just came off a bit greedy in that spot too. Recess. Okay, another tier it's going to. Unfortunately, the B tier, because I found the episode to be very baseline and just not the most compelling in the world. Also, I just found it a bit annoying when Toopy continues to manufacture time in such a rushed way. Play Clay, I think it's alright. Definitely a little fun mini rival between Toopy and Binoo just for whose clay is more scarier and better. But it's not to the level where it really reaches those high highs there, so I'm just gonna leave it in the A tier above Treehouse because I have more fun with it. Pumpkin Party. Another episode that I didn't find that interesting, but it's not that bad either, so it goes to the B tier. I think Recess is just better than this one, so below you go. The Lost Bear. Another episode that I just find alright, just an average adventure of finding where the bear went, but other than that, I didn't really find much of it to really reach it in such high regard. So for average episodes, I'll just put it in the A tier, like this one, so I'll place it right there. On and off, we continue this streak of just middling episodes. Although it was a cool hide-and-seek concept, it just didn't play out in the most interesting way, with Toopy constantly being the hider. Like, come on, man. Switch it up a bit, make things a lot more fun. So on the B tier you go. The Flying Hat. Okay, over time, I've grown a lot of love for this episode just because how amusing it is. And also, I failed to mention this in the review, but I just love the angle of Toopy looking up aghast by the side of his half-flying way to be so hilarious just because of how helpless he feels in that moment. I don't know, I just found it so funny. So yeah, I've grown a lot on this episode, but I still think it's alright in a way, so I'll put it in the middle of the A tier. Now we've got Meatball Western. I like it. It's definitely a lot more intriguing episode, but very thrilling pursuit of just a meatball, and incorporating that Wild West theme to the episode really made things a lot more interesting. And also visually too, as because Toopy and Binoo were having spaghetti and meatball dinner, the town would be made up of the dinner that they were having. So that was a cool little touch to it as well. It's thrilling, but not to a degree that I would actually say it's the best, so I'll just place it right here. Rockin' Toopy, oh my gosh, finally a music episode, and I adore it. I'm a guy who just jams to music, and Toopy and Binoo does a good job bringing the rock music to the show, and it is just such an incredible ride that I'm completely engaged with everything that's going on in the episode. So with that, to the top tier it goes. The 7 Binoos, another fantastic episode. Toopy's singing is just so soothing and pretty much brings so much homage to his relationship with Binoo that makes things a lot compelling with this episode. So yeah, I really like the emphasis on Toopy and Binoo's relationship here. And the fact that Toopy brought 6 more Binoos to the world is just wild too. Awesome episode, definitely goes in the top tier, but I'm just gonna have it below the other one because my memory of the episode has waned a lot before I rewatched it, so yeah. Santa Toopy. The only thing I can remember from this episode, slippers. I mean, I'm wearing slippers similar to that right now. But yeah, it's just alright as episode as well. Not that bad, but also not like the best in the world either. But the slow parts are not as egregious compared to others below where I'm putting it, so I'm gonna place it there. Strange New World. Okay, yeah. Now I finally get to an episode that I don't think is the greatest in the world at all. Definitely one of the more weaker episodes because I just found myself so bored with this episode. I mean, it is an exploration, but it's literally an exploration of their house. Like, we've seen those props before. Try a different kind of world that is not explored upon in the Toopy and Binoo world. Yeah, I mean, although this was the predecessor to the short series, I don't think the predecessor episode itself was that great, and definitely one of the weak ones from the show. So yeah, I'm putting it in the C tier, which is the bottom tier of this tier list template. Alright, Treasure Hunt. Definitely a much more better episode than the last one, because I think the exploration was definitely more intriguing. My memory of this episode was very vivid, and that does stem from the fact that it's pretty much a breakfast-themed episode. Considering the treasure ends up being breakfast, which does make me crave breakfast too. So that props it up quite a bit. Definitely the top of the S tier goes. Tickle Me Tail, I mean, I kind of find this as a funny battle between the two, and as opposed to a myth of a duster that is titled the Tickle Me Tail because it's ticklish. Like, these kind of things do come off as ridiculous. Like, I mean, it is a kids show, so there is going to be some really ridiculous things happening. But I do find this little battle between an object and some cartoon characters to be such a silly visual. But yeah, it is enjoyable, so I am putting it on the S tier as well. Mud Cake, another one that is very unique in my eyes. Love how much this episode kind of introduces you the concept of adjusting to the situation so it doesn't feel like you're alienating others in that spot, where at the end when it turns out the marbles that Toopy and Binoo needed ends up being a part of a decoration on a Mud Queen's crown. They just didn't want to take those away from her, considering how happy she feels with them as part of her crown's decoration. So they decide to adjust a bit where they can still use it but have the queen be a part of the surprise too, and that was neat and emphasizes a lot of the quality of Toopy and Binoo's characters, not really willing to make situations hard for others. So that's pretty unique to watch, and it's another one that goes to the S tier as well. Abracadabra, another thrilling episode that does stem from Toopy's impulsiveness, where it's so hilarious how he wasn't aware of the fact that Binoo forfeited from the spot as being his subject, but accidentally leaving his celery behind, giving Toopy the impression that Binoo became a celery, and the whole time the celery changed to do various things before reverting back to its normal form. And I think the last scene with Toopy learning the truth in a dramatic way really tops it off. So yeah, one little mistake on Toopy's end, but it does make things a lot more humorous in that light. S tier for sure. Aunt Mimi, a fun little relationship between an ant and a toy dinosaur. That was something. You know, although I did not have much vivid memories of this episode, I still had a level of enjoyment from it just because how interesting the narrative was. Definitely a fun episode. It lands on the S tier. Binoo blows raspberries. Definitely a fun character development in just a 5-minute episode. Basically, Binoo is scared of the story of monsters Toopy was reading for him, so Toopy read a book that would help encourage Binoo to overcome his fear of monsters, and by doing that, combating against them by blowing raspberries. It's a funny concept when you think of it, but I think the quality with Binoo's character in this episode was something that does greatly make me look at this episode as another strong one. So, as I guess is for strong, it goes right through that tier. Binoo's birthday. Okay, on paper, it would seem like a dragged out episode because how he just meander about with Toopy, bringing Binoo on a pointless adventure just to keep him away from the birthday surprise that's happening at his home. But when you really think about it, it adds a lot of suspense to that too, which makes things more fun. Because there are certain times that the surprise could have been foiled because Binoo does happen to spot some weird commotion in the background. And even I found some humor within the pointless adventure the two went on. Like when Toopy was trying to describe what they're looking for, there were some very funny discoveries they made, like a wobbly leaf and a bouncing stone, which that always stuck to my mind a lot. I don't know why, I just found it so funny. But anyways, yeah, straight to the S tier it goes. Binoo's Island. I did describe the episode as okay, pretty much embracing the imagination of Toopy making his way to Binoo, who's just stranded on a small island reading his book. But even when he finally makes it to the island, Binoo has already ditched it and is going outdoors like Toopy was planning to get him to. An okay storyline, but not the most compelling in the world, so it does at least go to the A tier as merits for its somewhat uniqueness. Binoo's Letter. Another episode that really epitomizes Toopy and Binoo's relationship. But to take account of the episode, it's good. Speaks a lot of the values of what Valentine really is, which is pretty much embracing that it's not only about love for couples, but it's more so earning your desires too. I did like the end part, when Toopy finally realized that Binoo's letter was for him, and what's inside was really just everything that emphasizes the strong bond between the two. And because the adventure was also a thrill, I think it's perfectly suited for the top tier, where I would put it at the bottom of it. Binoo's Wand. Okay, I like how they went for an episode of two halves here. First with Binoo discovering the wand, making use of it without Toopy knowing for some reason, but then Toopy finally sees it and demonstrates the proper use of it. Which I think that alone is good, but some of the episode just felt a bit too heavy-handed on the filler, so it decreases my immense love for the episode. It's still alright, not the worst in the world either, so it's another one that earns a spot on the A tier. Next we got Moonbounds. Like really, another one that's just totally mid. And not only the storyline quality, but also the animation too, considering Toopy's old model was used there. Which I'll be honest, as times go on, it just doesn't work for me. And I'm glad they went forward with the more polished model that brings a lot more of the charisma and fun choreography that this one tend to be lacking. So a mid episode like this goes in the B tier. Bubbles, one of the only two bath episodes in this series. Although I'll say this one I have less of a vivid memory of, but it's still fine, but not to a significant degree considering it's just a storyline of Toopy trying to find Binoo as he floats away in a bubble. Like, okay, so we're just getting our hide-and-seek-esque sort of storyline here with Toopy trying to reach Binoo. Like, we don't need that all the time. So, A tier it is. Christmas Eve. I mean, I did enjoy some of it for the most part, but it's still not an episode that I would highly revere to an extent that I would prioritize it on a rewatch. Like, I mean, Toopy and Binoo just going out to try and invite their guests only for them to not even be at their homes, which does turn out that it's all because the guests were a present that Binoo had for Toopy. So that was unique. Hear me out. I don't look at it as too much of a bad episode, but the adventure did come off pretty pointless and was a bit of a drag on the episode too. But with some acumen this episode has, it definitely puts itself on the A tier. Cinder Binoo. This one is a C tier. Yeah, I felt like the episode was just way too dragged out with Toopy wasting time trying to find the appropriate shoes for Binoo to wear at a ball, only for them to not even go to the ball. Like, that alone is an extremely underwhelming part of this episode, because if they had just went to the ball, then I would have had at least more satisfaction that the time that they wasted was worthwhile, but it didn't. So through that, and with some of the frustrations I had with the whole shoe situation, I'm just placing it on the C tier. Cloud gazing. There's not even a story for this individual episode, but more so a recap for the past episodes from the show, which is a cool little touch. And on top of that, I do like how some objects that represented the adventure would appear periodically with Toopy and Binoo as they finished their recapping. But outside of that, there really isn't much going on with this episode, but I will still keep it at B tier because the style is a lot different than most episodes. Color Me Toopy. I mean, obviously bias came into play because I love art, so this episode's story is perfect in my alley. This deserves more of an S tier. Well, although it's really good, I do think certain points it doesn't really work well for me, so that kind of knocks it off of it being on the top tier, but it's still going to be ranked among the higher tiers, so I'm just going to put it in the S tier. Bistro Binoo, I would say it was a fine episode as well. Just basically a story of just Toopy being a chef and feeding Binoo a delight, even though the food is just invisible, which is kind of an underwhelming aspect of it because it would have been a cool visual to capture the delightness of the food. But then aside from that, we have Binoo overeating where he blows up into a balloon before having to burp to let out all the gas. Like, it's just that. I don't mind that storyline for the most part, but when you're looking at the other episodes, they clearly have more strong attention to him. So I'm just going to put this, at best, near the top of the A tier. Duckling. Okay, not that bad. A story of Toopy and Binoo exploring different lives as an animals, even though they are animals themselves. But by the end of it, it was clear that the life that they were happy with was their own, which was the obvious, and I don't think it added too much significance to the episode as a whole. Don't get me wrong, maybe it's embracing the theme that even though others have different lives than you and you want to be like them, you have a life of your own and you just need to embrace with the life of who you are. The episode could be interpreted that way, but I think I'm just gonna put it in the middle of the A tier. Dustaroos. Alright, now we get a bit more of an action-filled episode with a very exhilarating chase sequence with Toopy Binoo and the Dustaroos, and then Binoo eventually joining with the Dustaroos, leaving it all up to Toopy to pursue them. That was all fun. Really captures that vibrant energy that you would get from a thrill of an episode like this, but to a degree, it's still not like that peak that I would want from an episode, so it makes its way to the S tier, around the middle. 4 seasons. A fascinating episode that I think goes on the S tier because it's kind of like the same level of thrill with the others, with a lot of uniqueness it captures, but also does have at least a slow point that does knock it down from the top tier, unfortunately. But yeah, good episode. I'm also impressed that the snowman didn't melt along the way, despite the close calls there was. Gargantua. Okay, we got another episode where it hones in on Binoo's excessive eating, but it's not to the point where he bloats. Instead, it's one where he becomes a giant and starts munching on a land of food that Toopy is on, with the mouse himself trying to escape him. I mean, it's good in a way, but I'll be honest, it's really just that, and there isn't really a proper resolution to the whole giant Binoo storyline really at all. They just transition him back to his normal size and back to the table, which that was just whatever, but you know, the episode is alright for the most part, so I'm just gonna give it another A tier ranking. Giant footprints. Okay, as time goes on, I've kind of lowered my opinion on it a bit, not to a significant sense, since I am still gonna put it on the S tier because I had a lot of fun with this thrill of an episode. But I do think there are points in the episode where it did come off a bit melodramatic, the kind of cringing at point. I mean, that one scene where Toopy and Binoo just kept spinning around felt like it was just so unnecessary, and we could have just ended off with them finally getting those footprints out. So because of that, I am put it on the lower end of the S tier, but I still personally think it is a solid episode nonetheless. Gone Fishing. Okay, a fishing episode that, combined with a fun little plotline, was definitely something noteworthy here, where Toopy and Binoo would happen to be fishing out the necessities, aka the exact missing items that each fish band members needed, so that was very convenient there. But it doesn't help with the fact that the episode does unfortunately drag out for a bit, so with that, I'm giving it a solid A. Happy Toopy Day! I love it! Very memorable episode, definitely very vivid for me. A great diverse element of basically Halloween themes that does really inspire a lot of ideas as well. So props to them for this creativity. Unfortunately, this episode is just not without its flaws. Rounding, it's that good enough to be a top tier episode because of my experience with it not being as hyped. So I'm just leaving it at the S tier. Invisible Dog. The episode was just okay, where the story depicts Toopy dealing with an invisible dog attached to a leash, while Binoo is just busy making a painting, which conveniently suits for the dog's nature as he paints a bone where the invisible dog would make its way into the painting and actually become visible at the end, which was a nice visual there, but I don't know, the episode just doesn't click with me as much. Still okay, but not to the superior degree. A tier, it is. And guess what, we're not done with Invisible episodes just yet because we have Invisible World. Okay, slightly better, much more memorable, but I don't think there was much more tension that can be done with besides just Toopy and Binoo bumping into invisible objects and furniture around the house. Oh, and I guess him wearing his invisible boots kinda is a sprinkle on top of how eerie of a world they are in. Well, technically it's only taking place in their house since the outdoor world is visible, it's just inside their house, and their solution was just using the same towel, like it was not that obvious. Cooler episode, definitely a lot more tense, but didn't have much more to add to make me feel more hyped with it, so another one on the A tier, putting it above the Invisible Dog episode. Snow Globe. I don't know. I barely remember what happened in this episode. Even after the rewatch, my memory of it has faded. So basically, from what I recall, it's just a story of Toopy and Binoo basically scuba diving and finding a snow globe treasure in a shipwreck. Like, that was it. Well, all I can say is yawn. Not much drama or tensity to it, but honestly not to like the worst degree that I think is outright bad, because there is still some merit to at least having some fun with the exploration, but it's still not the greatest in the world, so that lands this episode in the B tier. Jungle Toopy. Another one that's a B. Very baseline, not a compelling story, and I'll be honest, was more annoying than actually compelling. Considering Binoo's just interacting with a toy crocodile like he's actually in danger when he's anything but. So Toopy doesn't really need to save him because he doesn't need saving. Like, yeah, that was just not 100% fun to watch. But there is some remarkable moments with like Toopy's jungle yell and even Binoo's, but the episode still comes off mid, so I stick by for it to be a B. Little Red Binoo. So yeah, we're gonna continue a streak of B-tier episodes, with this one coming off extremely unnotable because, quite frankly, the storyline is basically dull. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is a level of quality with the episode because of how creative the story is, not going for a generic Little Red Riding Hood story involving a wolf, but you know what? Involving one would have been a better choice because it adds more tension to the story. Instead, the alternation of the story is just making it a lot more stable, but also less compelling too. So that just makes this episode very insignificant for me, but I will say it is at least mid, so it goes into the B tier. Magic Mirror. Okay, fantastic. Right away, I'm going to place it in the middle of the top tier because I think it's a extremely heartwarming episode that gives such a strong testament to Toopy and Binoo's dynamic. And basically now we see from Toopy's side of things how he feels about things as he immerses himself into a world where there are multiple versions of him who have their own specialty, which makes him feel like he is nowhere special, only for Binoo's presence to really highlight that Toopy does have a specialty in that he has an impeccable bond with this cat named Binoo. Very touching and pleasing, by far a Toopy-tastic episode. Nightlight. Oh dear, this episode is no good. It's an adventure that by the end of it comes off extremely pointless and ends in such an underwhelming fashion too that I think is just overall making the episode very tedious. Although some minor thrill with the pursuit of the shooting star, it also didn't felt right as well considering the shooting star had a life as well. So yeah, this episode just doesn't work with me, don't connect with me, and I don't click with it. I'm easily putting it at the bottom as of right now. The castle. What a nice contrast from the last episode. We're going from the bottom to the top. Yeah, you heard, this episode is also on the top tier as well. Because very memorable, has a really compelling storyline, with Toopy getting stuck at the top of a castle and needing to find help and eventually getting it, which is done in a really amusing way possible too. So I perfectly gel well with this one. Easy Toopy-tastic choice for me. Pet Palace. Okay, not that bad, but still not that significantly superior either. Just on the average scale, I would describe this episode as. I mean, let's just face it, Toopy just opening up a shop for pets and Binoo being his only customer buys all of them, only for him to not make good use of them, considering the best pet he can really have is Patchy, who's just a doll. So that made everything just monotonous in a way, but there was at least some fun with learning what each monster's skill entailed and how they would fit perfectly for someone like Binoo, so that was at least something. But yeah, a simple A for me. Power Pajamas. Okay, on the opposite of like giant footprints, my opinions on this episode have grown, but obviously not to a significant degree, but it is still memorable because it does tell its compelling theme of always trying to have an open mind and trying something new, which is what they did with Binoo and his new pajamas, where he didn't want to try them, and Toopy basically had to coax him that they are powerful, which technically they are, but considering he needed those kind of description to really persuade Binoo into wearing them, definitely is something that adds to the fatal flaw of Binoo's character of just fussiness. So I'm glad he at least somewhat developed himself from this episode. But yeah, it was just alright. A it is. Sky Friends, another episode that involved clouds, but I'll be honest, in a more fun way, where we're not just gonna focus on like recaps and stuff, we're gonna focus on creativity and actually doing something with what we got. Where Toopy and Binoo would just build cloud models of themselves, which was interesting to watch. But does it reach to the highs? Not trying to add any puns here. Unfortunately not really, but it's still averagely solid, like a solid A tier. Sneezing Toopy. Another good episode. Really, I would describe this another one that emphasizes on the dynamic between the two, but not to the high levels compared to the others that I had mentioned. Yeah, it was nice to see Binoo put in all of his efforts to make Toopy feel better, giving him such nice comfort and catering him all he needs so he can get well soon. And sure enough, he was successful, but unfortunately, he would now get the sickness and so the roles were reversed, which was a cool touch there. A perfect S tier episode. Okay, Sock Puppet, it was wonderful. I absolutely enjoyed these music-centered episodes. Like the Mama Do song has been stuck in my head ever since I rewatched the episode. But also that comes with the fatal flaw that because I didn't remember it, that's why I was unfamiliar with it until my latest rewatch. So although I'm going to put it on the Toopy-tastic level because it is just perfect, it's not 100% perfect that makes the episode really memorable when time goes on. Sock Safari, definitely a fascinating episode. Really thrilling on an adventure. The exploration of a different kind of dimension / world was a net positive for the episode. Basically, the whole story of Toopy and Binoo searching for Toopy Binoo's other sock was a fun concept, but the episode as a whole just doesn't connect with me as a top tier one for sure, because there is unfortunately some meandering about at points. Other than that, a good episode that fits perfectly for the S tier. Space House. I'm personally fine with this episode. Just a standardized episode of Toopy and Binoo going on an adventure, but this time it's in the concept that their house acts as a rocket ship going to different sorts of planets. And it was interesting to see some places that they went to, but outside of that, there wasn't really much significance or like really huge moment that propped up this episode more. So I'm just left with it as a fine episode, and that lands in the A tier. Sparkled Binoo. Okay, yet another one that gets a lot of time highlighting the dynamic between him and Toopy. Which this one's another Valentine's Day themed episode where it was nice that Toopy made him a sparkly card for him, which then the sparkles went on Binoo and gave him magical powers to fly and also make 5 different heart shapes with different sort of object, which would be his Valentine to Toopy's. So this episode does focus on the strengths with their bond, and it is sweet, but definitely the episode is just not one that truly makes that mark. It fits in line with what I would say the alright grouping of episodes, so it's in the A tier. Storm in a Bottle. Another one that I think is unique as a concept. Before the episode, it's just fine. Again, I do like it for the most part, but it definitely does not make that peak. So that's why I'm just gonna simply put it in its appropriate tier. A. Super Toopy, which is obviously the other predecessor to another Toopy and Binoo miniseries, but this one's a better episode than something like Strange New World because at least I have more thrill with it, even though it's not to the extent that it's actually spectacular or really such a huge hit. Basically what I'm just saying, it only hits the average mark, so with that, the result tells me that I'm putting this in the A tier. Big Blue! This episode is sick nasty. It looks good in blue. Okay, don't even go further with the Big Brother reference, but you get it. I remember this episode and I think it was good, but also silly at the same time because Toopy was kind of an embarrassment this episode, not giving Binoo a chance to finish off what he was truly drawing because he was only illustrating the blue umbrella that they have, but because he only finished the top part, Toopy was under the impression that he was drawing the famous Big Blue, which is a creature that looks like what he drew, which is actually real, and we do see that at the end of the episode, so that was a really cool revelation there, and it is somewhat enjoys the imaginary adventures Toopy went on in relation to finding the Big Blue, so that was riveting. Good episode, solid S. The Big Race. Okay, I remember this because mostly it stems from Toopy just constantly making mistake after mistake, ruining the race vehicle that he was on, which was really pulling him back from the race. And us viewers thought Binoo was just gonna make an easy win, or even the two of them would tie as Toopy would ride with Binoo on the bicycle. But no, a fun little twist here, Binoo's doll would be the winner after it was launched across the finish line. So that's fun, but the lead up to the ending was just alright, so it's another one that A takes. But you know, I have been rewatching this episode ever since, and my opinion on it has grown a lot, and there are some scenes that really stand out to me, or even refresh my memory. Like, this episode now gave me a lot more vivid memories after my rewatch of it. Cuckoo Clock? Yeah, another one I do remember, and I liked it for the most part. I will say, it does kind of remind me of the Reese's episode in a way where there was a lot of fast-paced situations going on, but I feel like this one was done more right, because at least the Cuckoo Clock timed it a bit better instead of just rushing through, and there was some fun with Toopy and Binoo going room by room and interacting with what was there, and it was a fun shakeout when there was a room that Toopy and Binoo had no desire interacting with, so they went back to the previous room, which I guess isn't illegal in the rules of Cuckoo Clock. So, decent episode, but it's just shy of making it to the top tier level, so I'm just gonna have it below it, on the S tier instead. Funny Bunny. Another decent episode overall. I mean, it's just a funny context is the fact that Toopy was trying to hide an egg, only to find out at the end that Binoo actually snuck inside the egg somehow, which was definitely a surprise for him, adding some sweet twist there. But But I do feel like the whole segments with Toopy trying to hide the egg in various places far from home just felt so contrived and was only there to pad out the episode. But it doesn't come in with some of its fun tensions, like the Gopher moment where it was trying to take that egg for itself only for Toopy to trick it and get the egg back, which that was very intriguing. The amount of meandering about did harm this episode in a way, so this goes to the A tier list. The Genie. Okay, if I were wanting to have a wish granted, I would want my wish for this episode to be epic, which unfortunately wasn't. It ended up just being totally fine. But yeah, it was just an episode of Toopy being a genie for Binoo's tea party and just getting way excessive on the suggestions of wishes that Binoo could make, which is like, let Binoo decide for himself. Jeez. But not much else is really going on with this episode, so I am leaving it in the A tier, but I'll put it above Funny Bunny because there was less meandering about. The Great Goo Goo. Oh wow, I actually was very astonished with this episode because there was just such a build-up Toopy was having that there was going to be a monster joined them for tea, only for it to be a hand puppet. But unbeknownst to him, he actually summoned the real-life monster, which is so crazy, man. And I just love how much Binoo was so mesmerized by the sight of the real monster and just waited for the monster to eventually sell himself out to Toopy, which he does, much to his shock. Fascinating episode. Easy S. The Land of Colors. I never actually properly assessed how I think of the episode in the review because I was mostly going on a spiel about how relieved I was to finally reach the end of the many segments I had to cover. But for this episode, I'm just okay with it. I mean, there's creativity to it, which does have some appeasement to my artistic love. But like I mentioned before, not the most significant to the level that would make this the absolute best. The fine tier means A tier. Under a bed. Not too much to say here, but I won't mind the episode as much. It is memorable to me because I do remember these monsters just being disturbed by the sound underneath their bed. It was somewhat a decent adventure, but likewise, it's just not the greatest in the grand scheme of things that propels this episode to the superior level. So it's just mostly average, and that's why it goes to the A tier. Baby Toopy. Oh my god, what a surreal episode this was, just seeing Toopy actually become a little baby. Like, obviously he's been in the parental position taking care of Binoo, but now the roles literally reversed. And at this point, it's kind of a way to teach Binoo the hardship of what parenthood is. And considering Binoo was displaying a lot of fussiness and stubbornness this episode, I think the experience that he just faced with taking care of baby Toopy was a way to teach him that the enjoyment from the parental position isn't the greatest, considering the amount of work you're going to put into to keep control of your child. So I like how Binoo had a change of mind and decided to play the baby at the end, so he wouldn't have to suffer through the struggles again. Decent character development, but definitely an S tier episode, that's for sure. Toopy Goes Bananas. Nah, I'm not gonna say it's the worst in the world either, so I'm definitely just gonna describe this as basic. Although I would say there is some annoyances I had with this episode with Toopy constantly just making mistake after mistake. Like, it could be fun on paper, but it just feels like it got a little too excessive. And especially at the end part when he attempts to take the fruit that Binoo wants, it's like it feels so real sus that they wanted the same fruit at the same time. And it could come off as Toopy intentionally taking the fruit that Binoo desired to have, which would obviously not be a great look on him. But whatever, okay. I think I'd put this on B. Toopy knows everything. Does Toopy know where I'm gonna be putting this episode at? Nah, he doesn't know that, but I know where I'm putting this episode at. S. Because it was super memorable. Love how much Toopy was trying to embrace this psychic power, which, okay, but it was just fun to watch. And the segment with the flying cereal bowl was very intriguing and had some really riveting moments along the way too, which makes you stand out. So that warrants this the S tier. Toopy's nose, I'm just gonna say that, S tier. What a pretentious adventure this was. All involving Toopy's nose bouncing away, which was just so humorous, and the fact that they had to interact with the game in order to fetch it back is just what I would describe a chef's kiss. And I also like how this almost goes full circle, but this time it was Binoo's turn with his nose bouncing away. So I guess those two definitely need to work on securing their noses on their heads. Yeah, awesome adventure, but unfortunately was just not enough to peak the highest of the highs. S tier it is. Toopy's story. No, no, no. I think I'm cemented on the fact that this episode is clearly not the best. It just felt so stale and the lack of energy was just not interesting to me. I was beyond bored with the episode as a whole. I mean, there are such minor moments, but even then, they're not even the most notable in the world to make this episode hold some weight to it. Yeah, Toopy's story, definitely very mundane, lackluster, and at this point, it might be the worst episode, so I'm putting it at the bottom. To be surprised, I mean, it's definitely a nice episode with Binoo putting in his hard work to make a special gift for Toopy. And it was cool, it was actually a giant sculpture of his best friend, so that was very sweet of him, continuing off this amazing bond with these two. But I just feel like the episode doesn't really connect with me as the greatest of all time, so I'm looking for more of the finer placement for this, so I think A is suitable. Train ride. Okay, another notable episode and memorable vividly, but it's not like there was too much tension to it either that made things stick with this episode. It's just fine. I like the variety of traveling methods Toopy and Binoo took to get to a single apple. But yeah, not really anything else to expand on this episode. Train ride, that's an A tier. Water wings, A. I mean, nothing against the episode on a whole, but I feel like the context with Toopy just continuously doing things that are completely unnecessary just felt old at this point. Like, I obviously love Toopy as a character, but then again, some of his characteristic qualities that we've seen like billions of times before just get repetitive and doesn't really add much groundbreaking nature to it. And this episode does not do any favors in really giving something different. But I don't mind that it as an episode. It's decent overall, so it gets its spot in the A tier. Diaper Dream. I had so much fun with this episode because Binoo was somewhat having a bad dream, although it's not about him, it's mostly about a baby monster he was hanging out with who was just feeling a lot of sorrow at the moment, which Toopy witnesses it and jumps into his dream to assist him. And I do like how it takes time before they finally discover the truth that the baby just needed a diaper change, and I just love how Toopy ends up getting one as well just for some humorous sake. But really, in comparison to many other episodes, it's just widely solid but to the average degree. Diaper Dream is on the A tier. Worm Circus. Okay, this is S tier material. It's simply so fun to watch, with Toopy and Binoo exploring a worm world inside an apple. And they bring it to the extent that these worms are also circus performers too. And it was a great visual to see Binoo really immerse himself in their performance while Toopy was trying to attempt his juggling, which he absolutely flopped at. But hey, he tried, so maybe he can practice and be better. But yeah, S tier material means it goes to the S tier. Soapy Toopy. Okay, another bath episode, but definitely the better one and the more memorable one to me since it aired way more often. But I did like how it was a soap adventure and basically Toopy and Binoo traveled under the sea just to find it. But hey, during the traveling they at least got to see some familiar faces, or let's just say bath toys that they have actually come to life, so that's unique. This episode in particular is good and all. I would say S tier for sure, but definitely not without its slow points either, which is pretty telling. The magic marker. Alright. There was fun tension when it involved some magic bunnies coming out of a hat that Toopy drew. And I like how they used the magic marker to their advantage to stop the bunnies, and they eventually did. But also, there had to be some dramaticness when Toopy thought he accidentally erased Binoo from his life, only for Binoo to just be playing a trick on him just for the sake of it. But the experience of this episode was just fine, but not really excelling to like the best in the world. So I'll have to put this in the A tier. Song and dance. Oh my goodness. It's so nostalgic. It is super memorable. Some of the songs here were just extremely unforgettable that I wouldn't stop singing them after watching it. Yeah, this episode was so precious to me. And because of that, I'm easily having it as the best episode. You heard it. We finally got another Toopy-tastic episode, and this one lands right at the top of it. Let's go. I think this episode is the best, like the most funnest and memorable to me, and give me such great nostalgia too. Big Parade, another music-like episode, but I definitely think it just has a lesser weight to it, but not to any sort of extent, because quite frankly, I absolutely enjoyed the whole visual of these objects basically following Toopy playing on his instrument, and it was such a fun rhythm too. It just sticks out a lot from this episode. But unfortunately, I also didn't remember this episode until I rewatched it as well. So there's that mild downside to this. I gotta put it at the S tier. Ballooning with Binoo. So this is basically a bubblegum related episode. But I feel like it was just so all over the place with Toopy trying to blow a big bubble and Binoo eventually blowing one bubble that makes him float with Toopy joining him along with it. But it's not to any sort of sense that makes it truly stand out. So what's this episode deserving of? The A tier. Godmother Toopy. Okay, no, it's just so tedious. Like, I just don't get much fun out of these episodes where we just waste time and stuff. I mean, most of the episodes do involve that, but at least there is some uniqueness and exhilarating aspects to them. This one in particular just doesn't seem to exhibit any of that. To be honest, I'm just left perplexed by the lackluster nature of this episode. And it does somewhat have a similar level like Senator Binoo, but I do think this one goes below Senator Binoo because it's just less notable to me. Eggheads! I love this episode. It was definitely fun how much Binoo was proving to be wrong. That the creature inside the egg was actually a bunny, not a bird. But maybe I could say a bunny bird since the bunny did actually fly at the end because it grew wings. But yeah, there's a lot of thrilling nature to this episode that makes it one of the more notable ones. But obviously does slow down a bit, which does put this down to the S tier. Camp out. Okay, I'm not even gonna waste too much of my breath on this episode, but yeah, it ain't good. I just found myself overtly frustrated with Toopy just disturbing other animals' sleep. Like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves because people need the rest time and you disrupting it just feels really ignorant on your part. I mean, not trying to say like Toopy intentionally did it because he was just trying to find a place to sleep at, but still, you could just camp out inside the tent bed that you just had. Like, it's not difficult. Like, the amount of frustration I had with this episode does put it on the bottom tier, but thankfully for it, not as the worst. Toopy's present, just fine. You know, in some context, Toopy could have just not wasted time trying to set up a more ceremonial way to give Binoo new floaties, but you know what? It does show how fancy he wanted to be as well, so don't get me wrong on that part. Decent episode, but definitely not the biggest standout either. A tier. Keyhole. No. Another just annoying episode for me to watch. It just made Toopy come off a bit stupid in this episode. Like, if you know that what you're activating makes quacking noises, you should clearly put them together that the key probably is suited for like a duck toy. It's not hard to put that together. So yeah, I had less enjoyment with this episode because it was just overshadowed by my annoyance with what Toopy was doing, which is in line with his impulsive nature. But anyways, bottom tier C. The Amazing Maze. Okay, definitely a lot more of an interesting one too. It was somewhat tense and had a lot of intrigue a lot of way, especially with the plot where there was a Joey that needed to reunite with his kangaroo mother, which he does so eventually, but he did it on his own. But yeah, you know what? It's also great too because the kangaroo was also able to help Toopy and Binoo out of the maze too. So that made something worthwhile. Which tier would it go into? S for sure. Grunt Monster, it's just fine. I do admit it is a fun concept that the monster ends up coming to life because it was always on Binoo's sock. And also, it was fascinating to know that there were other monsters that lived around Toopy and Binoo's house who would only be summoned when Toopy and Binoo consent with them to come out, which was pretty interesting. But yeah, a little bit of parts that slow down the episode, so it stays in line with most average episodes. A. Backpack. Oh yes. It's one of the greatest. I mean, the major standout is the fact that Binoo's doll finally comes to life. And it's cool to see his character qualities actually in such a personified form. Which is a shame that there wasn't much more of this because it would have been cool. But anyways, I like the whole hide and seek thing with this episode. And they do it better where each character takes turns. Not like having one character take it the entire time. So I like that balance and equality there. Just a perfection episode, but still not like the extreme best in the world that I would have in the top tier. So S tier it goes. Gopherville. It's just fine. I mean, yeah, basically a story of Binoo trying to fool around with Toopy a bit, hiding from him, basically with the help of gophers. But I do like that the end part where Toopy was able to now outsmart Binoo by baiting him, which ends up working, and Binoo was able to make his way back into Toopy's care. So that was at least something to compel me with this episode, but overall, I think it's just standard for me. So it goes into the standardized A tier. Topsy-turvy. Incredible. Such a great combination of the feeling in each temperature from hot and cold and hot and cold. And this episode made me crave for like popsicles too and ice cream. But yeah, I had so much enjoyment on this episode. Very memorable to me. A fun variety of things to do on their adventures, but just not to the level that makes it the absolute best in comparison to the ones above it. So it's a Toopy-tastic episode for sure. Robot Doctors. Okay, it is a spectacular one, but also can be relatable too, since we've all had that moment where we hurt ourselves and need a band-aid for it. It had an interesting narrative where Toopy and Binoo decide to be robot doctors to help operate on a robot who they pretend is hurt. I like that at all, but I did find myself a bit bored at points. Not too much though, so it does keep it still high in regard. I'm gonna stick it in the S tier. The Magic Whoosher. Okay, it is a thrill, but I feel like it's on a similar level like Gargantua, where we just have the whole world basically being consumed by whoever is powerful, and in this case, the Magic Whoosher that to be invented. And you know, it is a fancy way for inventions, but honestly, he could have just used a broom to sweep up a mess instead of going all in for it. But you know, it is what it is. This episode goes on a step below Gargantua. Toopy's bed. I like it. It's a fun episode where Toopy and Binoo explore different sorts of beds that would be comfortable for Toopy. Like, it was a variety of moments with each bed that Toopy and Binoo would try, but not really working out for them. I mean, I can list them out. The feathers, the jelly, the cotton candy, even the stack of mattresses. The clouds are definitely the most memorable ones to me. So it bolsters this episode to the greats, which is classified as S-tier material. Magic Bowl. Okay, it is another recap episode, but in my personal opinion, a much more better version of the cloud gazing, because there's a lot more creativity that they did with Toopy and Binoo basically reliving history through the use of a magic bowl based on an item that they put in that will recap a certain experience they had with that particular item. I do like that aspect that the show tries to go here, but in the grand scheme of things, that does not really make the episode the best, considering it's not its individual story really at all. So it's one that's not truly at its best, but I think it's a step above cloud gazing because it has more interesting elements to it. So in the A tier it goes. Snowflakes. I don't mind it. I think it has a sophisticated storyline with Toopy and Binoo attempting to feed a snowman something to make it bigger, which the amount of times that the snowman just did not seem to move at all. It felt like all of this was null and void, but then at the end of it, the snowman did eventually eat the food Toopy and Binoo gave it, and it grew larger, so that was at least a great touch by the end of it. I also do love the aspects with the snowflakes changing color that represents a certain fruit that Toopy and Binoo wanted to make out of snow. But you know what? The episode is just another fine one. Not that bad, but also not the best either. A's the spot it landed on. Jack in the Box. Okay, I like how it's another one that is of two halves. The first half being Binoo and Toopy trying to catch a Jack that makes his way out of the box. But then when Toopy accidentally catches Binoo inside the box, then we get to the second half where they're now trying to find Binoo, which Toopy eventually does, and they escape the Jack in the Box world. Cool and all, but yet again, I have to iterate. In the grand scheme of things, the episode comes off fine to me, lacking any sort of peak to really make me rank this any higher. So I'm just gonna leave it at the A tier. Peanut Butter Bar. This is another banger episode, and with that, I am putting it on the Toopy-tastic tier because I had so much fun with it. Also, it is unforgettable too. But to quickly summarize, it's basically a story of Toopy building a robot just using a cereal box and utensils, who's there to help make some PB&J. And a fun little aspect to it is that it is eventually joined by fellow other robots who are designed in a similar caliber, just with different utensil heads, and them together would make the PB&J just for Toopy and Binoo. So all that was really cool, and I had fun with the whole storyline. And Toopy eventually allowing his invention to join the others in the UFO ship was definitely a very remarkable moment. So I like that on that front. Cool narrative episode, Toopy-tastic for me. Tiger Binoo, another greatest of the greats. Which, for some quick context, besides last year when I did a full rewatch on the show, the year before I was actually giving this show a bit of a quick binge watch, and the only episode I was actually watching was Tiger Binoo because it was one of the first that really stuck in my mind, and it still remains unforgettable too. I like the aspect of Binoo becoming a tiger and just embracing the life of one, being able to roar like one too. And the end part was definitely the striking moment for me from the episode, just showing how much Binoo is able to play both as the tiger and the hunter as well. Where at this point, he's a tiger hunter being a tiger himself. So that was all amusing and fun. Great episode, but I do think it did get a bit too silly at points that did come off slightly cringe. So a bit of a mild harm there, but still another one to be tastic. Big Smooch. Okay, yeah, reflecting on my review, I did say this was a very awkward episode. And by my description of that means that I wasn't really a fan of it either, because I don't really like awkwardness because it just doesn't make the experience really pleasant. And this episode was just not a very pleasing one. But it doesn't mean that there wasn't some fun points too, because I just like how much Toopy just hams up this princess mold that he tried to do to try and get a frog to kiss him. But hey, kudos to him for at least trying and having a bit of humor in him in that. But you know, the uneasy feeling with this episode just makes me not perceive it in high regards. So I think the best I can rank this at is a B tier. The Three Bears. Okay, another one that I barely had a proper opinion of because I just felt like everything was so weird. Which to illustrate, Toopy is just blindfolded and trying to identify what he feels, which is funny that he doesn't recognize it that he traveled out of his house and into another residence and assumes that it's his bathroom, which is just so awkward when he's inside the Three Bears home. And although Binoo is just laughing at the sight of it, I was getting secondhand embarrassment because Toopy did not know what he had just put himself into. But anyways, the episode as a whole, not really much going for me. I don't click with it. So another one that makes its way to the B tier. Puppet Show. Just alright, but I think the storyline just fell a bit flat to me because when Binoo was trying to perform with his Toopy puppet, Toopy himself would just continue interrupting, trying to add more fanciness and other stuff to make the puppet show more cinematic, which just came off so unnecessary. And by the end of it, we wouldn't even get a puppet show, which that's just extremely underwhelming. But you know what? It is what it is. But it's not changing the fact that I look at this episode as just one that's alright, but not to any sort of level that makes it stick out. Puppet Show is another A tier. Where's Binoo? Where am I gonna rank this? A solid A. I think the whole element of having Toopy sticking head in book that gets him to reach out to anyone who's reading the same book at the same time is a cool aspect. But I think it also got a bit too predictable with how it ends because clearly it was going to be the last book that he would eventually connect with Binoo. So that kind of lessened my intrigue with it whatsoever. But I do think this element was cool to watch. But unfortunately, I stick by with what I say. Solid A. And finally, our last segment, Where's Patchy Patch? Okay, another Where episode, but I think this one's more better because an exploration sequence was involved and also took place under the blankets of Toopy and Binoo, which was an interesting world, and I think it's cool. And yes, on paper, it would come off as like, oh, stagnation because they're just like walking around searching for Binoo's doll who ended up being located behind the pillow. I still like what they did with the whole exploration to make some things more intriguing and suspenseful. So I'm coming out of this episode extremely positive on it, but you know, not to any sort of level that makes it stand out to the top. So it may not be the top on the list, but it's definitely the top of the A tier. So that is it for my tier list of all segments. Now I'm not done just yet because there is still the mini movies that I have to cover, which for some reason the template that I'm using did not feature them. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna quickly make a ranking going through each mini movie from worst to best and share my brief opinions on why I chose to rank them in that spot. So let's get right into the ranking. So at the bottom ranking, I'm unfortunately gonna have Binoo's Tall Tale, where a major factor to this is the fact that I didn't watch this mini movie at all until my latest rewatch of the show. So that made me very unfamiliar with this one. Don't get me wrong, I think it's good. It's definitely a nice little emphasis on Binoo's struggle as a tiny character and him learning the values of both from the perspective of being tall and small. So I like what they did there, and also as a way to pad out the movie too. But overall, it doesn't strike any sort of nostalgia for me since I didn't even watch it back in my childhood. So that greatly knocks this down to the bottom of the ranking. Then at rank 5 is Toopy's Halloween. Unsurprisingly, the only other mini movie that I didn't watch in my childhood. But I'll say this one has a much more interesting storyline with the fact that this is actually an Easter themed episode, but Toopy was under the impression that Binoo was dressing up for Halloween, so he just kept dressing up in various costumes before Binoo finally had to choose the costume for him and reveal that it was always Easter the whole time. Which I can get the awkward feeling from it. It's like, dang, you really mistaken the holidays. But you know, it was kind of a fun segment with Toopy trying out different costumes he wanted to wear, especially with him getting the help of some fun characters as well, which I am ashamed that they are one-off, because that's something that I don't like about animated shows is when they have these really interesting characters that only makes one appearance, which is like, dude, at least give them multiple appearances so there can be more time to shine on them. But whatever, solid mini movie, but it just doesn't reach that high point that the next 4 does. Rank number 4 would be Big Bad Christmas. It was a tough choice between these 4, but I feel like I had the least connection with this mini movie. It's still good and has a really satisfying storyline with Toopy and Binoo being able to shape the wolf to like Christmas again, exhibiting a lot of thrill, building up this very compelling narrative that does excel a lot with this movie. And considering from what I understand, this was the last sort of proper media from Toopy and Binoo, I think this mini movie was a great farewell to the old franchise, where I know the miniseries exists, but I would say in the mainline series, this one is the one that is the latest production of it, and I believe it does have a satisfying sign-off to this precious TV product. Love it, but I still think the other 3 mini movies are better than this, so that's why I rank it at number 4. Rank number 3, Binoo the Brave. A mini movie that had a lot of interesting storylines, starting with like Binoo being afraid of things only for Toopy to encourage him to embrace his courage, and then obviously the main storyline being Toopy and Binoo having to guide a princess dragon back to her home. And then we have this subplot with actual talking sheep wanting to see a wolf, and they do. So all three of these storylines find a resolution in such satisfying ways, which I think boons the overall premise of this mini movie. But I think what kind of puts it down a bit for me is that I think the middle part kind of gets a little stale because of the princess constantly mistaking her home to be hers, only for it to be owned by another fellow princess, which did kind of annoy me with how she couldn't even recognize her own home, despite being familiar with the description of it. So yeah, it's still a competent mini movie, but definitely not without its blatant flaws. Ranking it here at number 3. Ranking number 2, Hiccup Hunters. I think it's splendid. The fact that it really educates people that there are such ways that hiccups can be cured. I mean, technically they only teach it in one particular method, which is scaring others, but then they do it in a really fun manner as well. And the whole concept of it being a hunt to stop hiccups is definitely fascinating for me, and I am satisfied each time Toopy and Binoo were successful. Well, I would say Binoo is the one that actually made those shots to work on curing the hiccups, but at least Toopy tried as well, so give him some effort for trying. But I think what makes this not number 1 for me is because I just felt like because the method of curing was just scaring people and we saw that it was just going to become the norm in the episode, it just felt like it was repeating itself a bit too much and not really diversifying anything that would make the quality a bit more unique. So through that, it does factor into why I do not have this at number 1, but I still think this movie is incredibly spectacular, but just fell short of being number 1. So at number 1, Rockabye Bear. Why? Because I believe it has the most sufficient storyline. Introduces some really fun characters with like the bluebird and the owl, the bear himself. Like this episode is shaping up to be really good, and it does so, as we see here. It is of 2 halves. First half trying to prevent the bear from waking up in the middle of hibernation. And when the climax hits, and the characters unfortunately fail to do so, they now have to find ways to put the bear back to sleep. And those segments were really fun as well, but I do think it did get a bit tedious when some of the methods kept failing, which if I did add this to the tier list ranking, yeah, it wouldn't be at the top of the Toopy-tastic tier, but still, I did really like how the story of this mini movie was structured. Very consistent and encompassing such remarkable moments alongside a bevy of really fun characters too. A definitive number 1 for me on this mini movie ranking. Well, with that is it with my Toopy and Binoo tier list alongside the mini movie rankings. Let me know what you all think, and even feel free to comment out below what your personal rankings would be. It took me so long to make this, but hey, I wanted to dedicate this as much as I can because I know you guys are interested in these style of videos, so I'm gonna continue doing like ranking videos moving forward with shows that I've covered on this channel. Like this video and subscribe so you can get to see more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.